Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God, back with you with the next video in my series reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White. What is it? Inquired the beetle. Why, it's what I'm obliged to keep a little of in the house, to put into the blessed infant's daffy when they ain't well, Mr. Bumble, replied Mrs. Mann, as she opened a corner cupboard and took down a bottle and glass. It's gin, I'll not deceive you, Mr. B. It's gin. Do you give the children daffy, Mrs. Mann? Inquired Bumble, following with this eyes the interesting process of mixing. Ah, bless 'em, that I do, dear as it is, replied the nurse. I couldn't see him suffer before my very eyes, you know, sir. No, said Mr. Bumble approvingly. No, you could not. You are a humane woman, Mrs. Mann. Here she set down the glass. I shall take an early opportunity of mentioning it to the board, Mrs. Mann. He drew it towards him. He drew it towards him. You feel as a mother, Mrs. Mann. He stirred the gin and water. I drink your health with cheerfulness, Mrs. Mann. And he swallowed half of it. And now about business, said the beetle, taking out a leathern pocket book. The child that was half baptized Oliver Twist is 9-year-old today. Bless him, interposed Mrs. Mann, inflaming her left eye with the corner of her apron. And notwithstanding a offered reward of £10, which was afterwards increased to £20, notwithstanding the most superlative, and I may say, supernatural exertions on the part of this parish, said Bumble, we have never been able to discover who is his father, or what was his mother's settlement, name, or condition. Mrs. Mann raised her hands in astonishment, but added after a moment's reflection, How comes he to have any name at all, then? The beetle drew himself up with great pride and said, I invented it. You, Mr. Bumble? I, Mrs. Mann. We name our fondlings in alphabetical order. The last was Swubble. I named him. This was a Twist. I named him. The next one comes will be Unwin, and the next Wilkins. I have got names ready to be made to the end of the alphabet, and all the way through it again when we come to Z. Why, you're quite a literary character, sir, said Mrs. Mann. Well, well, said the beetle, evidently gratified with the compliment. Perhaps I may be. Perhaps I may be, Mrs. Mann. He finished the gin and water and added, Oliver being now too old to remain here, the board have determined to have him back into the house. I have come out myself to take him there, so let me see him at once. I'll fetch him directly, said Mrs. Mann, leaving the room for that purpose. Oliver had, by this time, as much of the outer coat of dirt which encrusted his face and hands removed, as could be scrubbed off in one washing, was led into the room by his benevolent protectress. Make a bow to the gentleman, Oliver, said Mrs. Mann. Oliver made a bow, which was divided between the beetle on the chair and the cocked hat on the table. Will you go along with me, Oliver? Said Mr. Bumble in a majestic voice. Oliver was about to say that he would go along with anybody with great readiness when glancing upward. He caught sight of Mrs. Mann, who had got behind the beetle's chair, and was shaking her fist at him with a furious countenance. He took the hint at once, for the fist had too often been impressed upon his body to be deeply impressed upon his recollection. "Will she go with me?" inquired poor Oliver. "No, she can't," replied Mr. Bumble, "but she'll come and see you sometimes." This was no great consolation to the child. Young as he was, however, he had sense enough to make a feint of feeling great regret at going away. It was no very difficult matter for the boy to call tears into his eyes. Hunger and recent ill usage are great assistants if you want to cry, and Oliver cried very naturally indeed. Mrs. Mann gave him 1,000 embraces, and what Oliver wanted a great deal more, a piece of bread and butter, lest he should seem too hungry when he got to the workhouse. With the slice of bread in his hand, and the little brown parish cup on his head, Oliver was then led away by Mr. Bumble from the wretched home, where one kind word or look had never lighted the gloom of his infant years. And yet he burst into an agony of childish grief as the cottage gate closed after him. Wretched as we were the little companions in misery he was leaving behind, they were the only friends he had ever known, and a sense of his loneliness in the great wide world sank into the child's heart for the first time. Mr. Bumble walked on with long strides. Little Oliver, firmly grasping his gold-laced cup, trotted beside him, inquiring at the end of every quarter of a mile whether they were nearly there. To these interrogations, Mr. Bumble returned very brief and snappish replies, with a temporary blandness which gin and water awakens in some bosoms had by this time evaporated, and he was once again a beetle. Oliver had not been within the walls of the workhouse a quarter of an hour, and had scarcely completed the demolition of a second slice of bread, when Mr. Bumble, who had handed him over to the care of an old woman, returned and, telling him it was a board night, informed him that the board had said he was to appear before it forthwith. Not having a very clearly defined notion of what a live board was, Oliver was rather astounded by this intelligence, and was not quite certain whether he ought to laugh or cry. He had no time to think about the matter, however, for Mr. Bumble gave him a tap on the head with his cane to wake him up, and another on the back to make him lively, forbidding him to follow, conducted him into a large whitewashed room, where 8 or 10 fat gentlemen were sitting round a table. At the top of the table, seated in an armchair, rather higher than the rest, was a particularly fat gentleman with a very round face. "Bow to the board," said Bumble. Oliver brushed away 2 or 3 tears that were lingering in his eyes, and seeing no board but the table, fortunately bowed to that. "What's your name, boy?" said the gentleman in the high chair. Oliver was frightened at the sight of so many gentlemen, which made him tremble, and the beadle gave him another tap behind, which made him cry. These 2 causes made him answer in a very low and hesitating voice, whereupon a gentleman in a white waistcoat said he was a fool, which was a capital way of raising his spirits and putting him quite at his ease. "Boy," said the gentleman in the high chair, "listen to me. You know you're an orphan, I suppose?" "What's that, sir?" inquired poor Oliver. "The boy is a fool. I thought he was," said the gentleman in the white waistcoat. "Hush," said the gentleman who had spoken first. "You know you've got no father or mother, and that you were brought up by the parish, don't you?" "Yes, sir," replied Oliver, weeping bitterly. "What are you crying for?" inquired the gentleman in the white waistcoat. And to be sure, it is very extraordinary. What could the boy be crying for? What could the boy be crying for? I hope you say your prayers every night, said another gentleman in a gruff voice, and pray for the people who feed you and take care of you like a Christian. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.